Hi, my dear viewers. I am very happy to meet you in another lesson on translation studies and its history. So previously, I have posted lecture on translation and translation studies part 1. Now we will have a detailed account of translation studies and its history with all the theories, made theorists from pre-20th century and 21st century too. Shall we move on to the lesson now? Hope you enjoyed the previous lessons too. And this lesson also will be useful for the students who are pursuing UG and PG, and they may have translation theory and practice or translation studies for your program. So please, we will move into the slide now. And here you see, I am very happy to quote George Steiner, translation theorist. So without a translation studies, and we would be living in provinces bordering on silence, unquote. So he beautifully quotes that. So the necessity of translation. So without translation, it seems that we will be living in the world of silence. And George Steiner is a translation theorist, and he posits that translation is not merely a linguistic task, but a profound hermeneutic act of understanding and interpretation. And he argued that all human communication is translation, and he poses a hermeneutic motion that consists of four phases. What are the four phases? First one is trust, second one aggression, third one incorporation, and fourth one restitution. In trust, the translator makes an initial intuitive leap of faith that the source text has meaning worthy of value. That is trust. And what is aggression or intrusion? That is, the translator breaks into a original text and extracts meaning and disturbs the original structure. That is aggression or intrusion. Third one is incorporation or absorption. The translator meaning is imported into the target language and culture, changing the translator's own language and worldview. So he changes the perception of the source language into the target language. And the fourth one is restitution or compensation. Here, the translator, he restores the balance by paying homage to the original text, and he restores its prominence, and he compensating for the aggression. So these are the four phases Steiner insisted on translation. Okay, and we will move to the next slide. It is an introduction to translation studies. So what is translation studies? So translation, if the translation is a process and the act of doing it, translation study is the study of how it is being done. The translation is being done. That is translation studies. So translation study is the academic study of translation theory and practice. It examines how the meaning is transferred from the source language to the target language. That is first one. Second one, this field, that is translation studies, developed as a separate discipline only in the later part of the 20th century. And this translation studies involves linguistics, literature, and cultural studies too. And moreover, it contributes to the unity of nations. And comparative literature, translation humanize the relationship between people and nations. And this study, translation study, acts as an intermediary between languages, thoughts, and cultures too. And they unite the self and the other in their truths, myths, force, and weakness. From a historical perspective, comparative literature and translation have always been complementary to each other. And formulators of translation theory. So, who are the formulators? First one is the French humanist Etienne Dolet. Next one is John Dryden. Third one, George Steiner. In the first slide itself, we have seen about George Steiner and his four phases of translation. And the fourth one, Marcus Tullius Cicero, and fifth one, Martin Luther. Here, the French humanist Etienne Dolet, who is considered to be the first formulator of the theory of translation. So he has offered five principles that has to be followed by the translators. So they came out with strategies or tools or modes or means for the translation. So the five principles that every translator should follow. So what are the five principles? Let us see. First one is the translator has to understand the sense and the meaning of the source text, that is the original author, and then he has a liberty to clarify obscurities. That is the first principle. Second one is the translator should possess the perfect knowledge of both source language as well as and the target language. Third one is the translator should avoid word for word renderings. Word for word or line by line renderings he should avoid. And fourth point, the translator should use the words that are in common use. So he must use the words which are very commonly used by the ordinary people, by the commoners. And fifth one is the translator should choose and order words appropriately to produce the correct tone. So the translator must be very careful in the choice of words which should reflect the tone and the emotions of the source language into the target language. So he must be very considerate to the tone and the mood of the original text. That's what Etienne Tolet pointed out mm, in his theory of translation. Next, we will move on to Dryden's in his preface to Ovid's epistles, where he tackled the problems of translation and he came out with three basic types of translation. So, what are those three basic types of translation? First one is metaphrase, second one is paraphrase, and third one is imitation. So, in the metaphrase, that means translating word by word or line by line from one language to another language, that is metaphrase. And what is paraphrase? It is a translation of sense for sense where the author's words are not so strictly followed, that is paraphrase. And the third one is imitation. It nullifies both metaphrase and paraphrase, that is word for word or sense for sense translation, and it corresponds to adaptation. Here the translator is given liberty to abandon the text wherever he feels like. So these are the three principles, basic principles Dryden makes it a point for the translators. And we will move on to pre-20th century translation theory, where we come across George Steiner. And he calls a sterile debate over triadic model of literalism, paraphrase, and free imitation. And he is okay. And then we will move on to Saint Jerome. Saint Jerome is considered as the father of translation. As he translated Hebrew and Greek texts into Latin for the common people to access uh, the knowledge of Greek and Hebrew and Greek. And his religious and scholarly texts earns him the title that he is the father of English, father of translation. And the next one is Marcus Tullius Cicero. Marcus Tullius Cicero, he outlined his approach to translation, and he introduces his own translation from the Greek of speeches of the 4th century. And now the person comes, Martin Luther, who translates a phrase, a famous phrase from German proverb. It's a proverb. So, what is that proverb means? With what the heart is full, the mouth overflows. So, this is the German proverb. With what the heart is full, the mouth overflows. What does it mean? That means to speak straight from the heart, to speak straight from the heart. So he clearly explains that by open quote, you must ask the mother at home, the children in the street, the ordinary man in the market, and look at their mouths, how they speak, and translate that way. Then they will understand and see that you are speaking to them in German. So, very beautifully explicates that how a translation should be, how a translator must be very keen on using the language of the commoners. So, once again, let me repeat. You must ask the mother at the home, children in the street, ordinary man in the market, look at their mouths, how they speak, translate in that way. Then they will understand, and you are speaking to them in German. And his concepts are fidelity, spirit, and truth. So Martin Luther's concepts about translation is fidelity, spirit, and truth. So it is a pre-20th century translation. Next one is theories in 20th century. So who are the major theorists of 20th century? The first one is J.C. Catford, second one Nida, third one Newmark Peter, and fourth one Roger Bell. So J.C. Catford uh, um, came out with and divides translation uh, into the following broad types of categories. And as I mentioned here, first one is extent of translation, second one levels of translation, and third one rank translation. In the extent of translation, you have two different types of translation. First one is full translation, second one is partial translation. So full translation, that means the whole of a given text is submitted to the translation process. That means the whole text of source language is to be translated into target language. That is full translation. And what is partial translation? So in this partial translation, some parts of the source language texts are left untranslated. That is partial translation. Next one is levels of translation. Here are two types. One is total, another one is restricted translation. So what is total translation? In this translation, the source language texts are replaced by target language material. That is called total translation. So the source language texts are totally replaced by the target language material. That is called total translation. And what is restricted translation? Restricted translation means some part of the texts are replaced by the target language material, that is restricted translation. And the third one is rank translation. In that rank translation also, you have two subdivisions. One is rank bound, another one is rank unbound. So rank bound translation is a kind of a literal translation, and rank unbound translation is just like a collocational or idiomatic expressions, and a translator may opt for any one of the above three types. So, as J.C. Catford came out with three types of translation, we have seen that extent of translation and levels of translation and rank translation. So, a translator can follow any one of these translation for translating the source text into the target text. Okay, and then we will move on to Nida's translation now. And Nida also came out with uh, three types of translation process. First one is analysis, second one transfer, and third one reconstructing. In that one, he followed formal equivalence and dynamic equivalence. He talked about formal equivalence and the dynamic equivalence. So, what is formal equivalence? The formal equivalence is one is concerned that the message in the receptor language should match as closely as possible with the elements of source language. So it must be very closely matched with the source language. So the target language should match very closely with the source language, both in form and content. Both in form and content. That is called formal equivalence. And what is dynamic equivalence? In dynamic equivalence, the the relationship between the receptor and message should be substantially same, not so closely, but substantially the same as that which existed between the original receptors and the message. That is dynamic equivalence, and it is more or less following the meaning of the original text to be transferred to the meaning into target language. And NIDA also came out with four basic requirements of translation. So, what are those four basic requirements of translator and when he translates? So, first one is it should make sense. Second one, it should convey the spirit and manner of the original. Original means source language, source text. Third one, it should have a natural and easy form of expression. And fourth one, it should produce a similar response. So, how it has a response in the source language, so the same response should have in the target language too. So, that is, these are the four basic requirements insisted by NIDA for translation. And the communicative translation, the description of communicative translation resembles NIDA's dynamic equivalence, and while semantic translation has similarities to NIDA's formal equivalence. So we have seen that NIDA's analysis and transference, restructuring, and how what are the basic principles he insisted on in the process of translation. And then after Nida, Newmark Peter. Newmark Peter insisted on two types of translation. First one is semantic translation, second one is communicative translation. What is semantic translation? Semantic translation is author-centered, personal, more powerful. Author-centered, personal, and more powerful. And communicative translation is reader-centered, social, and less powerful. And next one is Roger T. Bell. He came out with two types. One is a knowledge base, another one is an inference mechanism. Knowledge base and inference mechanism. So, what is knowledge base? And in knowledge base also, Roger Bell brings out four different types of translation methods or strategies. So, first one is source language knowledge, the syntactic rule, systems of the code, its lexicon, semantics, and its text creating systems. So first one is source language knowledge is important. Second one is target language knowledge must be uh, is all is very proponent for the translators. Next one is text type knowledge, and he insisted on the various types of knowledge: source language knowledge, target language knowledge, text type knowledge, and fourth one is contrastive knowledge of all the three language knowledge mentioned. And next one is inference mechanism. In inference mechanism, so the decoding of text, that is reading and comprehending the source language text first one, and then it has to be written in target language text, that is encoding of the text. That is the inference mechanism. So the inference mechanism consisted of decoding of text and encoding of text. So these are the various strategies, methods, or we could say that tools, that the theorists insisted or emphasized for the translation, the better and the best translation methods. And Savory's view on pseudo translation. So, what is pseudo translation? So, when a translation is not a translation at all, so it is called pseudo translation. And Savory replied, when the rendering is different from the original, so it is totally different from the original, it is called pseudo translation. And how we decide upon pseudo translation. So here are the points. Translators lack of knowledge of the original text and the target language text, that is the translated text looks as a mere paraphrase. It does not convey any meaning or tone or emotion of the source language text. So in such case, it is called pseudo translation. Linguists state a perfect translation is almost impossible since no language is substitute for another. Yes, we could say that translation cannot be a creative art and it cannot bring out the what is written in original text cannot be converted into target language, cannot substitute another. So that is the reason linguists puts forth in for pseudo translation, and Savory conveys that perfect translation conveys the spirit of the original. And Henry Gifford remarks the essential qualification of a translator is to possess a creative sense of a language and it should be acceptable to its target audience. So, the perfect translation should be accepted by the target audience in the same response what it fetched in the source language. So that is very important. So the audience, readers are very important when the translators decides to translate any work of art. Next one, friends' views on translation. Translator knowingly or unknowingly ignoring certain literary achievements. So, consciously or unconsciously, they ignore, they are ignorant of missing out certain literary achievements, and that will distort the whole literary work. So, adding or deleting from the original that shocked or distorted them as obscene. For example, changes were made in the translation of Harry Ape in order to bring the play relevant to the social thinking of Soviet Union at that time, but it becomes a flop and it cannot fetch more familiarity in Soviet Union at that time. He makes a valid statement that translating is neither a creative art nor an imitative art, but stands somewhere between the both. Okay, so it's not an imitative as it has to convey the idea of a original as well as it needs a transformation. So transform it as well as he does the work of transforming it. And he is a maker who is well aware of what he is making. So it's very, in a very clarifying manner, he points out that who is the translator? He is a maker, but who is aware of what he is making. Okay. And he acts as a medium to bring closer together two languages in a new form. So he is a maker and he acts as a medium who brings together, who takes the effort to bring two types of cultures and two types of languages into a new form. So these are the views and perceptions of friends on translation. And in an Indian context, we will see that what is translation studies. And as we are all Indians, and we know that India is a multilingual country with hundreds and thousands of languages. And translation alone can connect different communities, linguistic communities. So many epics and classical texts are translated into regional languages, from regional languages into English. And translation promotes national integration and cultural exchange too. And what are the methodological approaches employed by the translators of India? Here it is. Translated text from Indian languages into English, from English to Indian languages. It is a very complex task, and the theory applied is one is domestication, another one is foreignization. These theories are popularized by Lawrence Venuti. In the context of Indian literature, domestication involves adopting cultural references to make the text more accessible to English readers. And foreignization retains the original cultural text, but it cannot have much impact. So, the impact of these translations on both Indian and English literary landscapes. So, the Indian writers or the translators, they follow domestication instead of foreignization. And what are the latest trends in India? So, translation theories have developed in India, and two renowned theories worth mentioning are Gayatri Spivak and Harish Trivedi. Spivak translated Jacques Derrida from French and Magha Sweta Devi from Bengali to English. She explicitly outlined a post-culturalist conception of language use. And Trivedi looks at translation as a post-colonial experiment, and which is interdisciplinary in nature. And there are other translators of whom Tejaswini Niranjana and Rita Gotari are of international acclaim. So these are the very famous translation theorists. So in India, Gayatri Spivak, Harish Trivedi, Magha Sweta, and then Tejaswini Niranjana, Rita Kotari. As a medium of translation in Indian context, here we will see as a medium, translation has played a very important key role in understanding, analyzing, and disseminating socio-political aspects of Indian culture. and it knits India together. Translation knits India together as a nation throughout her history. Ideas, concepts like Indian literature, Indian culture, Indian philosophy, Indian knowledge systems are the outcomes of translation. So now we say that Indian writing in English, Indian gender studies. So everything is, all those concepts are the outcomes of translation. And translation has been a mirror and has led to the promotion and enrichment of indigenous literature by translating masterpieces of great masters of world literature as Shakespeare, Homer, Dante, Vyasa, Valmiki, Kalidasa, and Basha. And contemporary writers such as Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Kafka, Beckett, Loka, Eliot, and the list goes on like that. You read. I have given you the list. You please read and find. And here, the translated version of Bhagavad Gita can serve as a medium of spiritual and philosophical dialogue between East and West. And Gitanjali by Rabindranath Tagore is originally written in Bengali and later it was translated English by Tagore himself, and he has won a Nobel Prize in Literature. So through Gitanjali, everyone is familiarized with the poetic and spiritual philosophical essence of Gitanjali, and it introduced the world of Bengali in a global level through its literary aesthetics, mysticism, spirituality, and nature. So, this is how translation reflects India's socio-political landscape and cultural landscape and addresses it. Never um, forgets to address the issues like caste, gender, social injustice, and which hold the universal relevance. And translation contributes to the empowerment of marginalized section like the poor women, the Dalits, tribals, minorities, disabled, and others. And translation has become the voice of the voiceless, and it has become a cross-cultural event. So in recent times in India, interlanguage is being developed at the IIT Kanpur in the name of Anusarana, which allows the reader who knows one language to have a great direct access to the text in the another language through human-aided mechanism, machine translation, human-aided machine translation, that is HAMT. However, translation study still has its own problem. So, though the theorists came out with so many strategies and methods and tools to promote a translation, there are problems too. The greater problem lies in catching the right mood, tone, intention, feeling, and sense of the original writer. And then, what are the challenges faced by the translators in India? So, in Indian literature, which is very rich in cultural symbols, idioms, and philosophical context, but which do not have direct equivalence in English, that is one problem. And next one is the terms like dharma, karma, moksha carry layered meanings embedded within the Hindu philosophy. The person who is born and brought up in the Hindu um, um, religion could understand, could know the details and the meanings very clearly, but it cannot be those meanings and cannot be transformed very easily into English. Okay, so here dharma means duty and righteousness. Karma is action and its consequences. Moksha is liberation. So the person who is living the life of based on the Hindu philosophy, he knows, you know, the kernel meaning of all those words. but it is very difficult to convey the same meaning into English. And translating these terms require a deep understanding of the cultural, philosophical frameworks of Indian knowledge systems. Translators often employ so, in order to make them understand, the translators employ glosses, explanatory notes to clarify such concepts for English speaking readers. But this approach disrupts the narrative flow. And also, translation, in the process of translation also, there are some problems. What are those problems is there is a differences in the syntax, that is form of the source language, source text to the target text. So there might be differences in grammar and vocabulary and sentence pattern too. Cultural expressions and idioms which cannot be translated in a correct mood or correct emotion and with a correct apt meaning, that seems very difficult in the target language. And maintaining the style and the tone of the original text is it's yet another problem challenges the translators faced. Loss or change of meaning during translation, it's unavoidable, and uh, which cannot be avoided by the translators during the process of translation. And cultural and intellectual exchange. So here translation continues to serve as an essential medium of intellectual exchange. And translation projects like the JCB Prize, that is for literature, recognize and promotes works translated from Indian languages into English and emphasizing the continued demand for such literature. So the project emphasized that there is a bountiful opportunities for uh, translators in literature, um, and the projects fetch them 20 lakh. When they translate the text from English to regional language, they will be given addition of 10 lakhs. Okay, so machine translation and AI tools are opening new possibilities for real-time translation. Anyhow, there are many translation advancement and AI tools and machine translations are available in the present scenario, but human translators remain remains essential for preserving the authenticity and the depth of Indian knowledge system and literary works. So, living in an interconnected world, the role of translation is to preserve, disseminate, and to celebrate diverse cultural heritage that becomes even more essential. So, that is cultural and intellectual exchange. And these are the references where the PPT, ideas for the PPT has been taken. And if I get to state one more important translation, that is literary translation. So literary translation, so literary text, that is poem, prose, drama, novels are translated from the source language into its uh, into the target language. So, what are the characteristics of literary translation? That is called literary translation. Literary translation is a type of translation which is distinguished from translation in general. That is, literature such as novels, poems, plays, poems have been translated into target language. And what are the characteristics means? Uh, Expressive, first one expressive, second one subjective, third one timeless and universal. So these are the characteristics of literary translation. And what is non-literary translation? That is the person who undertakes translation of scientific and social science texts and technical terminology or news items, advertisements, and spoken and written political discourse. which are considered to be non-literary translations. And the third one is technology aided translation, that is machine translation, that is MT. Next one is computer assisted translation, that is referred as CAT, which are supposed to speed up the translation process. And there are pros and cons of computer assisted translation. Pros. What are the pros? Advantages are saves time, reduces error, ensures consistency, speeds up large translations, and speeds up highly technical translations, widely available and relatively inexpensive. So these are the advantages of the computer assisted translation. And what are the disadvantages? It is just a tool. Next one, poor accuracy. And it cannot understand the context. And CAT software cannot guarantee the confidentiality. And the final one is it is not great for creative material. So machine assisted translation or computer assisted translation is not great for creative material, and also it cannot guarantee the confidentiality, and it is just a tool and it may have a poor accuracy. So the literary, and finally we have seen what is literary translation, and what are the in literary translation, non-literary translation, and technology aided translation, and I have completed this presentation with pros and cons of computer assisted translation. So with this one, I have explained in detail major theories of translation from pre 20th century till now. And also we have talked about theories of India and translation in Indian context, and then what is literary translation, non-literary translation, and what are the advantages and disadvantages of literary translation, and what are the challenges faced by the translators, and what are the challenges they come across during the process of translation. So I hope that I try to cover the entire translation and translation studies, and this will be of great use when you are going to write your tests at exams. Uh, Please read and listen and enjoy learning. So with this one, let me conclude my lecture today, and I will meet you with another lesson. And you please share the joy of learning with your friends. Bye, everyone. Take care.